Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Byrne, and I am the executive director of Freak Film Festival. And I am here to welcome you to today's conversation about the documentary A Woman's Work, the NFL's Cheerleader Problem. Our guest is going to be the film's director, Wee Gu. The conversation is going to be moderated by Detroit Free Press staff writer Georgea Kovanis. And we are super glad and happy to see you here on today, the first day of Virtual Freak Film Festival. For those of you who might not be familiar with our festival, Freak Film Festival is the doc focus festival that is produced by the Detroit Free Press's newsroom and its business arm, Michigan.com. We've been around for 7 years now. We're usually in the spring. We had plans for a big physical festival this past April. The pandemic prevented that. So we're kind of in next best thing mode with going virtual this week. We've got 5 films that are part of our virtual festival. You can read about them, buy tickets, see trailers for all of them at freepfilmfestival.com. We've got lots of content loaded up on our social media channels as well if you want to check out trailers there. So along with showing films, Freak Film Festival is very much about kind of bringing in the Detroit Free Press style journalism to our festival, and that's why we do these sorts of conversations. Every film that's featured in the festival will have a conversation, and you can watch them a couple of ways. First, if you're here and you're listening to me now, you're live. That's one way. We're super glad you're here. The conversations will also be archived at the Freak Film Festival's YouTube channel, and if you are watching the films, once these conversations are over, they will be archived right next to the film in our ticketing partner, Elevant/Cinesend. So if you're here live and you think somebody else might enjoy this conversation, we encourage you to pass that along. Look for them to be archived a little bit later this afternoon. That is really all I have to say, except I really want to thank Wee for allowing us to have this film at the festival and for being here for this conversation. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Georgea, who I've worked with for a very long time at the Free Press. She's a great writer and reporter. I'm super happy that she's willing to do this conversation with us. She brings a super interesting worldview and a really smart way of going about things. And I know this is going to be a great talk. So I'm going to sit back and listen. It's all yours, Georgea.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. The film is fabulous. I'll say that much. It's very eye-opening, something I hadn't really thought much about, NFL cheerleaders. As Steve pointed out, we are profoundly lucky to have the film here at the Free Film Festival, and profoundly lucky to have Wee here with us. Wee, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Welcome. Thank you so much for lending us your film and lending us your time. Let's just get started. I guess what I'm wondering is what drew you to this film and this topic? Of all the stories that you could tell as a documentary filmmaker, why this one?
Yeah, I think for me is I started out just as someone who discovered football. So I was not born in the US. I was born in China and grew up in Canada. And when I came to Los Angeles to do my graduate degree at USC, I tutored football players. And it was also at the height of sort of the Trojans, a sort of Pete Carroll era where it was just like everyone was all about the football team. And it's something that I had never seen before in my life up until that point. And, I just started watching movies about football. I started watching Friday Night Lights, the TV show. And I realized, at every stage, starting from when you're a little kid, when you can play TV football, up until high school, college, the NFL, it is huge. Like every stage, it is so popular with communities, with, the entire country where millions of people tune in to watch Super Bowl. It's something that truly seemed like it brought this country together in this unprecedented way. So I just became fascinated with that. And I didn't even know that much about the game. Like I watch the game now and then, and then I was like, oh, okay, so this is how it works. But when I heard about Lacey's lawsuit, which first came out in 2014, and I realized that for her as a cheerleader in the professional NFL league, that she was getting paid less than minimum wage. It was something that was truly shocking. And, as someone who, again, grew up outside of this country in China, where, there is a profound sort of, or in my experience, profound sexism against women, the fact that I was born a girl, as an only child under the one-child policy in China, is something that I experienced from, when the moment I was born. So I think when I realized that this is something, this inequality that existed in such a huge level here in the US, it was something that I really wanted to look into, because I think that the one thing that really fascinated me was, being a cheerleader, being part of this huge spectacle that is, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and yet you're also devalued that much at the same time. It made me really want to look into that and just examine that kind of how that actually worked, and then also, how these women were dealing with it, why they actually stood up, and what was going to happen as they sort of fell from grace and became outsiders to this huge community they've known their whole lives.
That was one of the things that really struck me, is how for the two women who were the focus of the film, Lacey and Marie, it was interesting to me how being a cheerleader was certainly about athletics and being fit and everything, and enjoying the work. But it was also, it seemed like, a way to sort of find their place in life, or a way to sort of fit in. At one point, Lacey talks about how when she was cheering, nobody knew that she came from a home on the so-called wrong side of the tracks, or that she smelled like cigarette smoke or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting to me. And can you talk more about that, more about the motivations for the women to join this sort of work?
Yeah, I think to me, it's really something that anyone who's interested in being a team sport athlete, or working for a larger organization, or belonging to any kind of larger group, that you're looking for that sense of community. You're looking for that satisfaction when you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. I think we just experienced the elections here in the US, and a lot of the argument to voting is that you're participating in a democracy that is bigger than just yourself. And I think that is something that is attractive to anybody who's searching for meaning in life. And I think we're all searching for meaning, right? So I can definitely see that. But for women, a lot of the time, especially in, smaller places in the US, or places that are not sort of along the coast, there's not really that kind of ready opportunity for you to kind of just join this larger group, and there isn't really that many choices you have. So I think for Lacey and Maria, when they first got into dance, when they first got into cheerleading, it was an opportunity that was for them, that they were told, this is for you. You can join this. And they discovered their talents. They discovered confidence in doing what they did. And that's why, they kept doing it for years. It took years for them to train and to excel in this sport and in dance. So I think for them, it was just this meeting of opportunity, of their innate talents, and sort of and the ability to be part of something that is bigger than yourself. And unfortunately, I think that same desire was taken advantage of by some of these teams and the NFL.
And so it seems that coming to this decision to sue, I mean, they're not just suing their employer, they're sort of like being separated from what made them themselves, or what made them so valuable, or what gave them purpose, right?
Yes, definitely. And I definitely observed that in the film, where you're going from, it's almost like you're suffering from withdrawal, because you're going from being part of this team of 40 women, other women, dancing and performing in front of like 70,000 or 80,000 fans every Sunday during the season. You're a part of the community when you go out and do events, and you're meeting children, you're meeting families. It's obviously a very social, energetic experience. And then you're going from that to after they had filed these lawsuits and become sort of the black sheep of this community. They're really their social spheres just basically is them confined to their domestic space, right? And again, that's something that's not necessarily new. Like you see in the film, Lacey's lawyer, Leslie, talk about the treatment of women in the workforce. Looking at history in terms of World War II, when women were called outside the home to work in factories and help the nation in essence. And then after that was over, they're told to, oh, okay, now you can just go back home and be a housewife and sort of just stick to, your place, essentially. So it's something that I feel like women have experienced so much throughout history as well. And it is unfortunately very easy for women to be excluded from these larger arenas in that fashion.
Do you think that with Lacey, it seemed that a turning point came when her husband complained about, I had to stay home and babysit so my wife could run up to Napa or wherever to cheer. Do you think that, and he pointed out that she's not making any money out of this. Do you think that she would have sued if it hadn't been her husband? I guess what I'm wondering is, did her husband somehow, I don't know if she had concerns about this ahead of time, but I'm wondering if she did, well, I guess I'm wondering, first of all, if she would have sued without her husband pointing out what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't really say like what exactly she would do, but for me, when I look at that situation, she was the first woman in really 50 plus years of the history of the Raiderettes and the Raiders to really speak out and say anything about the fact that they weren't paid legally, and sort of all the egregious workplace problems that she was experiencing. So that is, 5+ decades of silence that she had to break. And it's everything, the way in which the teams onboard these women away when they first audition, when they get accepted into the team. It is sort of a part of a indoctrination that really starts immediately, and there's a sense of like peer pressure and the inability to really speak out, because from day one they really hammer into you the idea that you're here to be seen and not heard. And if you look at their handbooks, there's some insane rules that they have to follow. So with that kind of treatment, it's not a surprise to me that no one has spoken up until she did. And to me, or to anyone who is, suffering some kind of injustice or, wants to speak out about something, injustice or trauma, if you don't have the support of your family, of your friends, the likelihood of someone speaking out is very, very slim. So the fact that Lacey had the support of her husband, and she then later had the support of her lawyers, is a huge reason that she was able to have the courage and the ability to say something about this. Does that make sense?
I wonder if he sort of legitimized her work in terms of making her see that she should be paid for it. And I wonder if it's what it means that a man had to make her, perhaps, I don't know what was going on in her head, but I'm wondering if it's possible that, a man had to make her realize that, you need to get paid for this. You're worth this. It seems like, on the one hand, it seems kind of sad to me that somebody had to make her realize that. On the other hand, the cheerleaders talk about this being a family and a sisterhood and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, it is unfortunate that in a way, a man had to kind of put a mirror up and say, this is not right. But at the same time, again, I don't, it's not something I feel like, I blame women who don't, want to say something or didn't see why it was wrong. I think it's the fact that, men, again, like in the film, we have footage, from the 50s and 60s where it's like, this is what a family is. Work, a man's work is real work, and they get paid, whereas women are just in the house and that's what they do. There's no money attached. So it's something that is ingrained in everybody, in terms of how the history of this country, how capitalism works, how labor works in this country. It's something that men are taught from day one, that is what, you know, you are, this is what work means, this is what you need to get. And whereas women, it's like, no, you're taught to be grateful for any opportunities. You're taught that you shouldn't ask for too much. You're taught, you know, that you should not speak up. You should just stay silent and support others or whatnot. So I think it's to me, it's, again, it's not really that surprising that it did happen, but I think you know, I think that's what this film is about. And that's what today we are living in an era where, you know, women are realizing the power of their worth. And that's, I think that's a beautiful thing. And it's, you know, it's not too late.
With the scene with the reunion with the cheerleaders, especially the cheerleaders who were older, did there seem to be a generational split between the women, the ones who supported Lacey in her attempt to get paid, and the other cheerleaders who were sort of like, well, you know, it's just an honor, it's just a privilege to go out there and work our butts off and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely a generational gap. And I think that's part of the interesting thing also about the story to me, because if we look at history, if we look at the history of women's movement or feminism, again, there's these huge gaps between the different movements, the first wave, second wave, and, you know, sort of what we have now. And I think that's unfortunate, because that division really led to the inability of some of those movements to really, you know, push change forward and to really create meaningful change, because there's division and there's sort of a gap of understanding and knowledge that different generations have of the previous generation, or vice versa. So I wanted to include the perspective of these other women who came from, you know, a totally different time. Like some of the women who started in the 1960s, they were in high school, or middle school, they were teenagers when they were asked to perform in the NFL for football games. And that's when the NFL was also at such a nascent time in their history. And, you know, these women had their parents sew their uniforms for them. And, you know, they were just really excited to be out of school and to like dance and perform in this arena. So I think they came from that mentality. And then also talking to some of the women from the 1990s who were part of the teams. And, you know, when Anita Hill happened and when they saw, you know, more about sexual harassment in the workplace, and they felt like a sense of shame, because they were like, oh, wait, so, you know, we shouldn't, like the fact that we dress like this, you know, it's really like, we shouldn't necessarily be proud of that, because apparently that makes men, you know, sexually harass us. So it's this, you see these like problematic ways of thinking that have accumulated, you know, for decades. And I think it was it was just great to see the evolution of that and how we can have a more of an understanding of where these women come from, so that we can kind of come together and have actual dialogue and be able to move forward in terms of changing things for the future.
Do you, how did the women handle being sort of kicked out of the sisterhood with the other cheerleaders who didn't support them? How much did that weigh on them?
I think it weighed on them really heavily, because because, you know, they were cheering with these women, and it's such a tight-knit group of people that, you know, they do feel like they're family. And then to have, you know, and Lacey, you know, she talked to her teammates before she filed the lawsuit, and many of them were in support of her, you know, privately. But when she came out with the lawsuit, you know, then it was like, okay, no one is going to talk to her, and everyone sort of stopped talking to her and calling her and things like that. So there was a complete sort of silence and lack of support after she came forward. And you're dealing with basically your entire social circle and social life disappearing. And again, the only thing she had was her husband and her daughter. So it's again sort of being combined again to that kind of domestic space. And it was really difficult for them to deal with. having like no sort of outside contact. And in some ways, I guess now in the era of the pandemic, in terms of social distancing and not being able to interact with other people, it's kind of like a similar thing. But there's also a feeling of everybody is angry at you. Everyone sort of hates what you did and blames you for this or that. Like the Bills actually disbanded the Jill's cheer team after they sued. So there was this huge blame placed on Maria and the other women that came forward with the lawsuit, that they were responsible for the fact that, you know, the team was disbanded, when in fact it's the decision of the Bills and management, not obviously the decision of the women. It's a form of retaliation, and something that you see often in terms of battles between workers and owners and employers. So it's just something that they had to deal with psychologically. It's like a huge sort of burden on them, especially too because they're so used to being valued because they made people feel good. You know what I'm saying? Because the role of cheerleader is to bring enthusiasm, bring joy, bring happiness, bring energy to whatever arena, you know, that they entered. So it's just a complete kind of turnaround.
Yeah, there's just so much loss. You know, for Lacey, moving with her husband, you know, losing her friends and moving to England with her husband for his work. And then at the end, they're like somewhere in Florida. It just sort of seems like for her, there's so much loss. And for Maria, oh my God, her mother dies. You know, she loses her friends. She's, you know, getting blamed for the demise of the Buffalo Jills. I mean, I just can't imagine like all that loss and sort of the strength, honestly, the strength of these women to get through it, basically. It was pretty impressive, I felt.
Yes, that definitely, they have a lot of resilience, but I think it's something, again, that women have had also for such a long time, where it's like the ability to focus on just getting through, you know. And I think by the end of the film too, like I started the film in 2014 and then sort of wrapped up in 2018. You see this whole new wave of women come forward with complaints, federal complaints or lawsuits against their teams, and there's a sense of redemption for Lacey and Maria, because, you know, they were out there sticking their necks out when no one else was saying anything. There were like maybe a couple other teams, like 4 other women that had come out, but you know, they were in a way sort of silenced after all of that came out. And so I think there was a sense of like redemption when there's this whole other, like, I think it was like maybe 6 or 8 other women that came out again in 2018 after the Me Too movement. So I think, again, I think it's just like a slow trickle. There's like, I see like a build, you know, a slow trickle, a build, one wave building upon another wave. And slowly but surely there's change, there's more conversations. And I think that, you know, that's the difficult thing when you're so divided and you're so isolated, to have that, to rebuild the sense of sisterhood on your own terms, right? I think that's what is really needed. And, you know, that's what they're craving. And so I think all of these women now who have stood up and who have said, no, that we don't want to be treated this way, they're asking for league-wide change. They want this kind of league-wide change to happen, so that, you know, it guarantees a better experience for future dancers and cheerleaders. And so I think it remains to be seen if that can succeed. And I really hope that is something that can happen.
Do the women consider themselves role models at all, or do they consider what they did to be brave or gutsy or standing up for the rights of women to be paid? Do they consider what they did to be a big deal, I guess, or do they? You know?
I think it's both. I think it's a little bit of both, because I think Lacey mentions, you know, when she first came out with her lawsuit, everyone was saying, like, a ton of press was saying, like, oh, this is so brave of you. You're changing everything. You're like a hero. But at the same time, she still felt the sense of guilt, right? Because she felt the sense of guilt because, you know, the Jills were disbanded and all these other women supposedly stopped talking to her and, you know, didn't agree with what she did, and you know what I mean? Her own community didn't necessarily agree with her. So I think it was a very
going against the family, so to speak.
Sorry?
She's going against the family, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very sort of complicated feeling. But like I mentioned, sort of at the end, toward 2018, and also when the film came out at Tribeca, New York, when everyone was going up to them and saying like, "Thank you for what you did," and this is such a brave thing. I think again, it was kind of this like catharsis, right, for them, because it's something that again they were so isolated that they didn't even like if they didn't have a way to even process like, oh, okay, wait, it did affect people, and it does affect people. So it was great for them to see that.
Now, Lacey is teaching dance. What is Maria doing now?
So Maria has been working as a tax accountant for years. So she is still an accountant, specializing in taxes in Buffalo. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, what was interesting to me was the amount of access you had with Lacey and Maria. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided at what points you would follow them, and how you decided what aspects of their lives you would show us as viewers?
Yeah. So definitely it was very difficult because I live in Los Angeles. Lacey was in Oakland, then she moved to London, and she moved to Florida, and then Maria is in Buffalo. So sometimes it would be, for example, if there was a legal event like a hearing or a mediation case, then I would know, okay, I need to go over there and sort of document like what is happening. And then sometimes it was, okay, what is happening sort of on a personal level, like, okay, you're going to, this is a milestone that I want to be there for while you deal with this. And I think the one thing that was really tough was, as you mentioned, Maria losing her mom to breast cancer, because, it's something that is really personal, and that kind of loss and grief is something that is really personal, where for me as a filmmaker, with someone with a camera in a way who has power to go there and sort of document that whole process with a camera instead of just being a human being also and just being there for her during this loss. It was a little bit ethically complicated to really think about. But I was there for her wedding, which happened right after her mom passed. And that was where I really wanted to focus, my lens and sort of document her process of going forward with this wedding, while at the same time being there for her as she's processing her grief. So, yeah, that was definitely a tough time.
How did you balance that, Lee? Because as you pointed out, on the one hand, you're a filmmaker. On the other hand, this is somebody who you know now, and you've been with off and on for a few years, who's in a really tough spot and grieving. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and I think as a journalist for you too, I mean, I think that's part of your work too, right? Dealing with people who
that's why I'm asking you. I'm looking for some tips.
Yeah, I want to ask for some advice from you too. Maybe you can share after. But I was talking to my friend who is also a filmmaker recently, and we're saying like documentary, the form of documentary itself is inherently exploitative, and it's something that you can't really ignore. The fact that you have a camera and you're then like a beacon, and you're taking these stories from these people, and you're going to be sharing them with who knows who, right? Like the wider audiences. Immediately that sets up like a power dynamic. And I think the way that I dealt with it, in a way, the way that a lot of filmmakers deal with it is it's a personal thing. It's something that you have to sit with yourself, and you have to really sort of negotiate what you're okay with and what is best for you, your story, what is best for them, for your characters that you've been following and you've developed these relationships with. So you have to like weigh all of those things. But I think nowadays too, there's more conversations about best practices in our industry, which I'm really happy about, because it's something that was not really talked about before. when I was learning the craft or anything. I think this is something that now is really in the forefront of dialogue about how to change our industry. How to make it more equitable for filmmakers and for characters, especially when a lot of the times filmmakers are telling stories of people who are disadvantaged or marginalized or who are suffering. So yeah, I think that's getting very interesting.
It's so tricky, I find. I've been doing this for a long time, and when I was younger, I would come across somebody in a sad situation or a really difficult time somebody was having, and I might go home and cry about them or whatever, but I would never do it. I would never let them know that. Now I find that I'm older, and maybe, I don't know, I think I've always been pretty transparent about what I'm doing, but maybe I'm just more transparent with my feelings. I don't know, but like a month or so ago, I was talking to a lady who had just been through an unbearable tragedy, and like we cried together. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It was just a human thing, I think.
Yeah.
And I just think that's what's so remarkable about documentaries, and yours in particular, is just this ability to it felt so intimate to me, especially when when Maria's in the car, crying, and then like trying to pull herself together and stuff. It was just so intimate. And I don't even know where I'm going with this, except to say that it was noticed, and I think it really added a whole dimension to the film.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, I still feel like conflicted about some of those things because, again, I think when, having gone to film school and also gone through the industry and talking to funders and getting feedback and things, and there is just the expectation that we're going to deliver some kind of very vulnerable, possibly tragic, I don't know, like moment in the lives of our characters. And I get it because, yeah, it's powerful for audiences to see, right, that kind of vulnerability of another human being that you would never see in real life because you would never even have the opportunity to meet them. And that's part of the beauty of cinema, is you get to meet people who you would never meet in your day-to-day life. You get to sit with them, you get to be with them, you get to understand what is going on in their minds and in their hearts. Like, that is the power of cinema. But at the same time, when you're dealing with documentaries, when you have real people and you have that expectation from across the industry, it's very difficult because sometimes you feel like you're expected to be like a vulture or something, who is waiting for something terrible to happen so you can sort of put that into your film and make it a good story and make it sort of adhere to the classic like 3-act structure where you have the lowest point of the character in the second act. I'm getting kind of technical, but all of those things are expected from you. And I feel like as filmmakers, and for me, I want to push against that. I want to have, obviously, create this kind of intimacy, but I also want to challenge audiences too. I also want to challenge, like, what is actually going on with you, as you're watching the film, and not just like feed this kind of bottomless pit of, like desire. Yeah.
Right. I understand. I mean, for me, that scene in the car, it really made me understand the level of loss that Maria had gone through. I mean, obviously, when people see sort of the unvarnished or unvarnished scene or unvarnished truth, then people really understand what it is like and what people are going through. But that scene in particular, it really made me really understand about like how much she had lost. I mean, her mother now, you know, first her sisterhood, God, now her mother, it's just like, it was just a lot. And at the same time, it made the story, it made me really understand. It made me really understand her story, I felt.
Yeah.
Now, tell me why did you add Maria? Why not just go with Lacey? They're on each sides of the country. I mean, was that appealing or?
Oh yeah. So after when I first started this, I thought it was just going to be focused on Lacey. But then more women stood up. Like more women filed lawsuits across the country. It was like the Jills, and then it was also New York Jets, Crystal, and Manushka, who is from Tampa. So all these women kind of stood up, and then to me, that's from that time, I really felt like this is not just about one individual, right? And when we look at history, or it's not really about just one person doing something that then changes. Sometimes it is, but they're on the shoulders. They're standing on the shoulders of so many people, and there's so many people standing with them. So I really wanted to also, bring that out and to say, Lacey, she was the first woman to say something, but then all these other women joined her. And we were following Crystal, who was also in New York, who cheered for the Jets as well. But in the end, we decided that it's more about these two women because, we couldn't, like, it's the space that we had, which is, a feature length film. Like, we want to go deeper into the lives of these two women. And it was a way to show, these similarities, but also differences, right? In terms of who they are, why they chose to be cheerleaders, why they chose to be doing what they're doing, and also the nuances of their legal case. I think for Maria, her legal case just had more sort of levels of complication because they also brought in the NFL in their case, and they were owned not by the Bills, they're owned by another third party, but at the same time were asked to be Buffalo Bills cheerleaders. So that was an important part in deciding to include Maria's story as well. And then also that was also why in the end we decided to include some of these other women who spoke out in 2018, because I didn't want it, again, I didn't want to just stick to sort of the single protagonist hero's journey kind of structure. I wanted to show like how one person affects someone else, and then affects someone else, and affects someone else. It's like kind of like a relay race, or like a chain reaction that happens, and all of us sometimes are in these like isolated silos of our lives and what we're trying to do, but we're actually connected, right? We're actually connected by the world around us and how we affect it. So I think that's part of decision making in terms of not just having it focus on one person.
Did working on the film change the way you think about football and the whole spectacle of it?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it just made me just go deeper. And I feel like I've spent so much time with this world now that I just have this kind of depth of knowledge. And I think it's like, I think I was listening again to another reporter who reports, on these huge issues and things. And she was talking about how, as a writer, as a journalist, you become a student of the system that you're reporting on. And I think that for me, that's exactly what happened, because I was able to spend time and just learn about this institution. And also in the film, you'll see we have a lot of footage that they created through their huge publicity and marketing machine that we then took and sort of repurposed and explored differently in our film. And that was also fascinating because, again, it's like trying to see the message behind what the purpose of what they're trying to do, their goals, and try to understand how that affects people and how that contributes to this inequality. So yeah, I definitely see it differently, but I still watch football. I'll still watch it. I'll still tune in, because also I want to remain vigilant. I want to see what they're doing, so that I, as an active member who is a fan or whatnot, part of their constituents, I guess, like I can be vigilant as well.
It's just so interesting, the idea that the cheerleaders are being promoted, and the video and the cutouts and the posters and stuff, and yet they're not being paid. And there was that great moment in the film when at Buffalo, that one guy said, nobody watches the cheerleaders, blah, blah, blah. And his friend said, well, you're watching them every Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
It's really just very interesting to me that the idea of like raising them up in value, but refusing to pay them, which, as we've discussed is there's certainly a gender component to that.
Yeah, I think that's in so many ways how women have been treated, and women are treated in different areas of life, where you have extreme expectations. You have, these rules. It's about control, right? It's about control, and devaluation, and all of that coming together, is the reason why women are treated as second class citizens, in so many arenas of life. So again, pointing out those strategies, pointing out those tactics gives us knowledge, and gives us knowledge of our own worth.
Actually, we just got a question from an audience member who is wondering what sort of challenges you had in funding the film. Was it hard to get money for it?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. I think had I looked like someone else, had I been, a male filmmaker, a white male filmmaker who has a track record perhaps of making films on sports, it would have been way easier. And there's been a couple of films actually that were finished before my film about tangential subjects, surrounding cheerleaders, that were directed by filmmakers like that, who were finished way earlier, who had support from huge networks, etc. So for me, it was difficult to get the buy-in, to get the trust, and people saying like, yes, I see your vision, your ability to make this film, and here is some funding. So it was a long process. The first people that came on board was ITVS, who then later also came on board to allow us to finish the film. So in many ways, this film would not have been made without them, and some of the people that worked for them, that really saw the potential in the film. So we got funding that way, and then we also got some grant money from Sundance, and also I have to shout out Firelight Media, which is just a great organization, and I went through their fellowship program, and they also gave us a bit of money for the film, a bit of funding for the film as well, which really helps. So without those organizations, it was very difficult. And part of that was these organizations were designed to help, BIPOC, like female filmmakers or non-binary filmmakers, that are not necessarily recognized by the mainstream media or mainstream documentary media. I know, people say we're now in this golden age of documentary, but if you look at it closely, it's also like, who are the ones who are profiting, who are benefiting from this golden age? So I think these organizations were able to see that there was this inequality and this lack in our industry, and they concerted, like, worked really hard to support filmmakers like me and other filmmakers to finish our films, to put our films out there. And without those organizations, this film really wouldn't be what it is.
Do you think people saw your film as an attack on the whole male football complex of, like, chest banging and beer and cheerleaders? And I mean, do you think people saw this? Do you think anybody saw this film as an attack on that whole, like, straight male culture sort of Sunday afternoon thing?
Yeah, and I think I have to say it's also not just men. Like when the sort of challenges we came across, it was also just women who are also sports fans, who are saying like, this arena should be protected in a way. Like, okay, because this is such a fun thing, it's such a great thing that people love. People stake their lives, their identities, who love these sports. It should be sort of a safe place from criticism and examination in some ways, right? Or if you're going to take that on, And I agree with this to an extent. And that's why I spent so much time doing research, right? And understanding and studying this system and institution. But they're like, if you're going to take this on, you have to know everything about football. You have to know everything about the history and what's going on, the different teams and whatever. The list goes on. But you know what, though? That's not true. Because I have to, as a filmmaker, my responsibility is to know enough so I can make this film, so I can deal with the themes and, the challenges of my own film. It doesn't mean I have to have a fucking PhD in football. Okay, so I'm sorry to swear. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but that was like the expectation, right? And again, I don't know if I wasn't me, if I would have the same expectation. Like,
What about this came up a couple times in the film where people said, "Oh, you knew what you signed on for with the cheerleaders. You know what you signed on for. You know what you were getting into." How do you feel about that?
That's such a classic argument, and I think that's such a classic argument that anyone levies against women. It's it's like part of a victim blaming kind of mindset. Whether it's sexual harassment or sexual assault, where you're saying, okay, well, like, why did you go to this party? Why were you?
Why did you wear what you wore? Or
it's like questioning the personal choice of the individual versus questioning the fairness or the justice of the environment, the system in which they're living their lives, right? And I think it's probably part of a human thing to not do that, because it's easier to be like just focused on the individual. Like, okay, well, that was this one thing. Like if they didn't do that, but it's harder to bring your mind, to open your mind and your eyes to see the bigger picture. But I think that is the key. That is the most important thing that one must do if you become an adult in society. Or even if you're younger, you don't have to be an adult. It's to learn how to see the bigger picture, how to view and understand your place in this bigger system and how it works. And then from there decide, how do you want to affect this larger system, right? What role can you play and do you want to play, right? So
I've been watching The Crown lately, the Diana years, and actually what's come up with her in the show is people saying, well, you knew what you were signing on for when you married the Prince of Wales, blah, blah, blah. And well, no, you really didn't.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
Really. And you're right. I do think that is often often a value that's put on women. Well, you knew what you were getting into. Well, you knew what you were doing when you wore blah, blah, blah. Or it's really, I don't know. Is that ever going to go away, do you think?
I don't know, because this even came up recently in just my industry in terms of documentary filmmakers, where there was actually an anonymous article that was written, published in Documentary Magazine about a horrible experience this female sort of filmmaker had in dealing with a very well-known, and this is all anonymous, like a very well-known other filmmaker who kind of hired her as, in a way, to kind of ghost direct or ghost direct this film, that then he later sort of like fired her and just took over and took all the credit for this film. And some of the reactions by people were surprising to me from the documentary industry, because they were saying, well, this woman, like, I would never be able to personally afford to pay this crew to do this work in the first place. So I would not even have said yes to this deal in the first place, or I would not have been able to say yes because I'm not as well off or rich as this person, this woman. So while I understand that aspect, like, I get it. You're seeing this other woman complain about this treatment when you can't even get to that place in the first place. But at the same time, you're part of this dysfunctional hierarchy. You're just, let's say a couple rungs like underneath her. So if you're like next in line. So I think there's just a lot of people always think about, approach these things from, well, what would I do? Or, I wouldn't necessarily do that. But it's not like, you shouldn't only be thinking from that perspective. So I'm not sure what it will take, but
it also doesn't matter. It also doesn't matter what I would do or what,
yeah.
It's been a very just like a very, very fascinating film to watch. Anything else you want to say about it, Lee?
You know what? It's also been a very interesting year for the NFL, for professional cheerleading, because of the pandemic. And you see the way the league and the different teams have fumbled coronavirus and the spread of the virus among their players. And for the women, they actually did have auditions. They had teams going, and then some of them were told, okay, we can only take veteran cheerleaders. So everyone else, sorry, we can't take you on. You can't perform. And then they were told, oh, okay, you can't go into the stadium. But then they were allowed into the stadium. But then they were like, oh no, we can't have you on the field. We'll have you like sort of on this in this other area in the stadium. So it's just been, and you see the fact that league-wide change really hasn't happened yet. You see the cost of that. You see the negative effects of that on the women. And I mean, these women continue to work hard. They continue to train. They continue to stay fit throughout all of this so that they can be their best and they can perform. So I think it's just, again, it's sad to me to see that. And I just really, hope that more women can really come together, because that's what it really will come down to, is unity, and coming together to do something and to stand up together and to somehow get rid of some of the fear that has really, locked them down for so long.
Do you think, how do you think the U2 movement will, I'm sorry, God, the Me Too movement, how do you think that will impact the future with cheerleaders not being paid? And also, harassment within the NFL certainly is not.
Yeah. I mean, you have, for example, this year, the Washington football team and sort of the lawsuits that came out of that team where these women were treated horribly, and the cheerleaders, the team had created like videos of, cheerleaders that they were like, half-dressed moments that were like outtakes or something that were circulated among the management. So that was like horrible treatment, and riding off of like the effects and the consequences of the Me Too movement, some of these women were able to stand up and say something about it. But again, I think individuals can only go so far. I think it needs to be a concerted thing, and I think the natural reaction of these large corporations and also the teams and the league is to kind of like do a distraction. Like, okay, for example, when these first lawsuits came out in 2014, the NFL decided to have a women's conference, like an
annual. That was rich. That was just, that was fabulous. Oh my God.
Yeah. and then, I want to believe the league is doing more now in terms of racial justice after Kaepernick and after, this year's racial uprising, and, they pledged to give millions of dollars to different organizations. Like, I really hope that they sincerely want to address that. But at the same time, it's also seems like they're just kind of throwing money in terms of publicity and marketing to kind of distract people. Like, okay, they're making these promises. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And we have slickly produced commercials with players talking about racial justice. But like, how are you addressing that within your organization, the way you treat players, the way their deals, their contracts are structured, the way you deal with coronavirus protocols and keeping them safe, So like that, that I think is something, again, that people need to remain critical and remain vigilant in terms of like seeing past the spectacle and sort of the millions of dollars they spend for marketing to actually look at what is actually happening and how the treatment works on a day-to-day basis.
I just have one more question, and I'm wondering what your favorite football team is these days.
I really don't have one. I think that's another
Lions.
where I feel like people always ask me like, "Oh, who's your team?" I don't have a team, and I feel like as a fan of football or someone who's watching, like you don't have to prove your loyal. I don't feel like I have to prove my loyalty. I'm not afraid of people saying that I'm not loyal to a team because why should I be loyal? Like it's not a given. You have to prove it. You know, you have to earn. And my loyalty is something that has to be earned. It's not something that is just like, oh, whatever. And I understand for people who are born into fandom because their parents were fans, and you know, the moment they're born, they started, you know, being a fan of a certain team. Like I get it. But at the same time, for me personally, I don't choose to just follow one team. I don't choose to be a diehard fan of one team. But you know, I'm watching the games, and you know, there's some teams that have more interesting narratives currently, but there's not really one that is standing out to me. So, and you know, I think a couple Super Bowls ago, it was like a really boring game. So what I'm really interested in is just like having exciting competition and having something like fun to actually watch. So I just hope that, you know, that can be possible during this coming Super Bowl.
Well, we thank you so much, and thank you for your film, and thank you for your time. And on behalf of the Freak Film Festival, thank everybody for tuning in. And for now, we have films coming up through the rest of the week. And so, for the best thing to do for the schedule is to go to the website freepfilmfestival.com. And that will give you information on what's coming up, how to buy tickets, how to view, and basically everything else you probably want to know. Thank you so much. Watch the film; it's fabulous. And thanks, everybody.
Oh wait, can I say one thing? The film is going to be broadcast. The 54-minute version of the film is going to be broadcast on PBS Independent series on January 4th. So everyone can just check, you know, their local PBS station website for the exact timing, because sometimes the timing is not quite the same. But it's going to be on January 4th. So I encourage people to tell their friends, whatever, tell family to go check it on PBS. And then it's also going to be released, the feature version will be released digitally on January 26th. So January is just going to be a big month for us, and the film will be more widely available for people to watch.
But the film festival's film, that's what, a minute, I'm sorry, an hour 20?
Yeah, so we have two versions. The PBS version is about 54 minutes, and then the sort of festival and also digital version is going to be around 77 minutes. So yeah, it's a longer film. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you.